The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. We're excited you're joining us for day one of our Cloud Summit series focused on the latest insights and tools in cloud technology, including 6 webinars on important topics facing every business. Welcome to our second of 3 webinars today, Data Security and Compliance, How to Protect Sensitive Business Data. There's a couple of housekeeping items we'd like to mention before we begin the presentation. All attendees are on listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit them through the GoToWebinar question box. We'll be collecting questions to answer as a follow-up to this session. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. We have Lance Knepper, who is the Cloud Services Director at Velocio. So Lance, I believe we're ready to go ahead and transition over to you.
All right, thanks so much. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Very excited as the Cloud Services Director to be a part of this Cloud Summit. And with all the different choices of things that you could be doing today, we really appreciate you spending some time with us. We want to definitely make this valuable to you. This is obviously a very important topic as it relates to businesses and what we need to focus on as technology leaders and business leaders. As we get into the agenda, I'm going to go through a couple slides just to cover a little bit around the overall summit, but also just to really dive into this topic and focusing around digital business and defining that and how that can relate to digital threats, understanding what is your critical business data as a business leader. And then we're going to talk about a solution set for Microsoft called Microsoft 365. And the thing about Microsoft 365 is it really contains components, most of which you probably are using or have heard of, but packaged in a unique way to really support small, medium, and enterprise businesses. So we'll break down the business and enterprise edition, and then we have a few slides around comparisons. It's always important to kind of see, compare and contrast both from a cost perspective and what feature sets are in the different versions. So that's the agenda. As Rebecca mentioned, we have, with day one, this is the second session. So we talked about business continuity and disaster backup recovery and Azure recovery. The next session after this, coming up at the top of the hour at 3 o'clock, will be the Power Suite and how to really, which is a great session, a great topic around how businesses can leverage some new tool sets from Microsoft around mobility and also around process flows. So highly recommend if you can make that session at 3 o'clock, that would be a good one as well. Tomorrow, 3 more sessions, a very popular one around cloud ERPs and how they compare, and certainly a hot topic with all the things, whether it be with Microsoft or NetSuite or some of the products you'll get to see in that session. So again, if you're not signed up, please do so. Another great session around collaboration, Office 365, and how to leverage those tool sets. And lastly, I'll be back personally, and I'll be working with Tyler Bowman to present around the integrated cloud platform and moving maybe some of your other systems up to the cloud. So again, some great topics, all 45 minutes. We want to hit certainly the topics that mean the most to our clients and other companies. So quickly around Velocio and where we are as an organization. Most of our clients know us obviously well for our accounting ERP solutions, our CRM solutions. Everything to the left is really a great stack of different solutions we bring to the table. My team and a big part of what Socius is really driving as part of our cloud strategies is around both Azure public as well as private cloud as well as Office productivity. And so that's as it fits into the cloud services model, we're going to talk mostly around this Office 365 and one of the solution sets that we bring, which Microsoft 365 is kind of under that umbrella. So but as you can see here, we handle cloud assessments, hosting, infrastructure migrations. So the cloud service team is really duly focused on helping our clients move at their pace to the cloud that really helps drive their business. So as we think about digital business, and that certainly, whether you call it digital business, digital transformation, is a buzzword that you hear a lot around the world today. And from a Microsoft perspective or other analysts or providers of technology, digital transformation is a key that all companies should be looking at. And really, it's about how a company like yours can leverage the cloud technologies that are available on demand, paid for as you consume services, and really essentially, how do you use it? How do you leverage technology to delight your customers, drive productivity, and really provide that personal customer experience while also trying to meet and exceed your stakeholders, including those as far as costs and revenue, and certainly controlling those costs and driving revenue using technology. So that's all great, and digital transformation has a lot of promise. But with that, of course, promise and opportunity also typically means the opposite side of that can be a risk. And when you think about digital threats, I thought this was an interesting quote I found here, that you're more likely to experience a data breach of at least 10,000 records, which is about basically 27.9% likely, than you are to catch the flu this winter. So 5 to 20% according to WebMD. So reality of this particular bullet point is, there is a high risk, and we're seeing it with some of our clients. They have a couple stories, at least some background of things that we have seen in clients, what they have experienced, and even some things that Velocio has experienced as a technology provider. This was a pretty staggering number here. Is the average global cost of data breach worldwide averaged 3.9 million in 2017. This is according to Ponemans Institute. There was a research done around the cost of threats and insider threats. And when you think of an insider threat, we talk a lot about external threats and risks and hackers and things, but don't lose sight of insiders potentially causing issues as well. And the average cost of an insider incident was almost double, actually a little bit more than twice, what the total is for all global data breaches worldwide. So this is the full gamut of small, medium, and large businesses. When you think of insider incidents, you can think of things like maybe employees that are non-compliant. Maybe they just don't follow policy and procedure. Maybe it's folks that inadvertently make mistakes. And again, they are a rule follower, but sometimes we click on the wrong thing, or we go to the wrong location. Insider collusion, maybe fraud or theft, which even worse, someone that's persistent in being malicious, really looking to gain long-term financial rewards. And don't forget about, not that we would assume you'd have any disgruntled employees, but certainly those that on their way out may want to cause damage or create some kind of havoc. So key thing here is threats come from all sides, and something to certainly be aware of as you're thinking about your technology spend around this area. So, for a lot of our clients, there's different landscapes around what your digital world looks like today. And certainly on the smaller side, small, medium businesses, sometimes we see that there is no real strategy, or a very loose strategy as it relates to how we're buying technology, how employees are leveraging our technology for running the business. Also, sometimes, especially when you're looking to save costs, sometimes the current legacy systems are good enough for what you're trying to do in your business, and they probably are running fine if they're running Windows, Server, Windows 7, Windows 8. Those platforms have been reliable over the years. The problem always comes in is they're good enough, but are they good enough from a risk and security perspective? And then ultimately, your back office, how you're managing your users, the security, and what a lot of companies are doing, that's still the case, where you're bringing the best of breed solutions together to handle your antivirus, your malware protection, your security protection, which creates these fragmented endpoint solutions. So the combination is whether this looks like your business today, or maybe you've already done some things to really tighten this up, we do still see a lot of this as far as when we come out and meet with clients or new prospects, that they're still struggling with some of these challenges. Also, with that fragmentation of bringing the solutions to the table, it can lead to real business risk. When we talk about collaboration activities, whether you're using tools like SharePoint or even Microsoft Teams or whatever your collaboration tools are, reality is employees are spending a lot more time together, sharing documentation, sharing information, making phone calls, having discussions that are being recorded more than they have in the past 20 years. Also, reality of the world we live in today, the bulk of the workforce from a global perspective has moved to mobile. And they demand solutions that allow you to have applications that help them to interact, whether they're in the office or remote or in a warehouse. But mobility continues to be obviously something that is driving business. And lastly, and while it's certainly unfortunate, especially at the small business level, that's where attackers, you see the news around these large data breaches. But reality is 43% of cyber attacks actually go after companies that are less than $50 million. And so that's a pretty staggering number when you think about what they're going after and why they're going after that market, because typically speaking, most of those companies don't have the right level of security in place. So this is one story I want to talk about, and the client, we're not going to get into the specifics of the client name, et cetera, but in 1 year, in a 1 year period, one of our clients was hit with a malware attack, 2 different strains, essentially with the same result. And what does that mean? The hackers basically came into the network, they sat for a while, they took control of their network and installed ransomware software on every one of their production servers, making that data inaccessible. So essentially, the client, and good news was they had good backup strategy. They were backing up to the cloud, but their backup recovery time to get everything back was close to 2 weeks, and some systems even longer. So the cost and the time to recover was pretty drastic, and certainly impacted their business. We had a process and a project in place to move to the cloud. We had a lot of the production systems in testing, and they got attacked again with another strain of malware. This time, at least from the cloud production systems, we were able to have those up and running within less than a 2-hour period. We ended up migrating most of their production stuff to that area for their ERP and CRM, and was able to get them up quickly. But this, again, is a real world thing that we're seeing, and something that certainly you need to be thinking about when you're laying out your business plans. We talk about mobility and cloud, but inherently that creates certainly challenges around security. As we talk about, there's a high need or desire to have mobile solutions, but also, a lot of employees certainly use their smartphones for work, and they're using their personal phones, or bring your own device to work. And that's a really great policy, but with that creates inherent risks if you're not managing those platforms. And also, a lot of times they'll use applications that may or may not be company approved. We call shadow IT. So those solutions that maybe you don't have management or control of, how do you make sure that you have security in place for that? And ultimately, some surveys have been done, and a lot of network intrusions certainly come from stolen credentials. And I have a story about that here in a minute. But certainly, users, certainly most of them are not malicious in how that happens. But that is a way that certainly intrusions can come in, and once they're in your network, they can certainly do havoc. So security, we talked about in general risks, and I think the third piece of this, which is really important, and what we're seeing a lot of for our clients as well, is the need to have compliance. And this is being driven from a lot of different fronts. And we think about compliance, it could be things like federal regulations, it could be internal policies, it could be your company that's subject to certain either government or requirements around financials and reporting. And compliance itself, especially we've at Velocio have worked with different companies that require us as a vendor to meet certain requirements. Whether that's FedRAMP, you hear some things that you typically see when you think of compliance: HIPAA compliance, PCI for credit cards, ISO compliance for quality. Sarbanes-Oxley certainly was a big topic, in the early 2000s. And one that's really new, and we're going to talk about that briefly here, that came into effect this year, is the GDPR, the Global Data Protection Act. And so that's although most folks will look at that and say, well, that's a European thing, we'll talk about why it's important potentially for your business as well. So all those things have unique aspects that you have to meet, but typically they all have very similar things around logging and monitoring, safeguarding your data, ensuring that your data is encrypted when it's in transit or when it's residing on your servers, and lastly, physical security, access to maybe your server room or to computer. So all things based upon the compliance, whether it's the compliance that you need as part of your business, or for working with your customers and require those compliance things that you have to consider. So I'll take a minute and talk about what is your critical data. And in today's world, we've proliferated data because storage is cheap. And with that just means your data is probably in a lot of different places and stored for years, versus what something we used to maybe keep 2 years of history and move out. So reality is, it's made us all lazier from the standpoint. It's great to have the history because it helps with reporting and so forth. But again, it puts a lot more emphasis on the security of that data, ensuring that it's being secured. So when we think about critical data, a couple good definitions. If critical data is without which a firm cannot operate or remain viable, and if compromised, could suffer serious financial, legal, or other damages or penalties. So again, a lot of that comes back to the compliance side of things and what you're required to do. But certainly, if you think about some of the things that you're storing in your environment, in your system, some of these, especially if you've been in the retail or distribution space, PCI compliance is just commonplace. But there may be other data like your customer list or your intellectual property that maybe you're not thinking about and how to secure that information. There's another story of a client in 2016 that a hacker group essentially got into their environment and stole a variety of corporate personal information. And this is essentially about 500 gigabytes of data that they claimed that they had, including R&D materials, including emails, including personal photos of key leaders in the organization. And essentially, once the hackers got the data, there really wasn't anything that the company could do. They were threatened to release all the information. They really couldn't stop it. And the reality is, at that point, the biggest risk is their brand and ensuring that their brand isn't damaged. based upon, especially in today's business climate, and how important it is for folks to understand when breaches happen and what the impacts of those breaches are. So that was certainly a lose-lose situation, and something that, again, really is a reminder to all of us as business leaders that we need to ensure we can, have the right level of layered defenses in place and keep that sensitive data out of reach of criminals, or those even internally that may want to cause damage. And this is just a quote directly from an article that said, "We have everything they ever created." That's not a scary quote to read and understand from a business perspective and think about things that's important to your business. Again, that's something that should make you act, whether it's as you look at Microsoft 365 or whatever solutions you implement for your security and compliance. So I always like to not just talk about the issues, but also where you start. And I think from an overall perspective, you really do want to focus first around your definition and what are you trying to, what are your strategies, what is your objectives, how are you trying to really control your data in your environment. And that's a big part that most companies that haven't really gave a lot of focus on this, it takes time. Once you've defined what you're trying to accomplish, you have to go through a strong discovery process. You have to understand what is data discovery, where my data resides, and really document where your key data is. At that point, create your baseline and security for those, as it says here, those crown jewels, or what are those critical data elements that are important to you. And then go through the process of assessing where are you today. Assuming you had no controls, what is your risk as it relates to that key data? And then use that to define those gaps and identify potential solutions that you can bring to the table. Next step at that point is to implement the right solutions around security. And that can include software, that can include business process, it can include monitoring, those type of things, which is really the next key. Once you've defined your security, you've implemented your security and compliance needs, you then have to make sure you have consistency, monitoring, and action on whatever comes up from that monitoring perspective. Okay, so just a great set of steps. Again, it seems simple, a lot of work here to do this, but don't shortcut the process is my advice on that. So let's talk a little bit from a Microsoft perspective, and certainly one of our key products that we focus around is called Microsoft 365. As I mentioned on the beginning of the call, Microsoft 365 is really a combination of things that you may have today, or maybe things that Microsoft previously had sold separately and is still available as an a la carte option. In this case, they've brought together three really major elements, which is Office 365, which is the software as a service base of Office. We've done some internal reviews of customers that are using Office, and when we ask the question in webinars or in meetings, almost everyone, of course, is using Office. Certainly some Google Drives out there, but not everybody. About 30% of our clients are currently on an Office 365 suite. So there is opportunity to move that hosting of your email, whether it be on-premise or another provider. That's part of the Office suite, as well as things that you're used to: Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. But also with this, it includes Windows 10, and it depends upon which version you get, some of the enterprise features as well. And lastly, an important facet of what we're talking about today is security and compliance, and leveraging what they call the EMS and the security suite to really drive better intelligent security. So let's walk through some of the elements of that as we look at it. And as I mentioned, going back to your fragmented solution sets, this is what we typically see in talking to clients as they're trying to solve problems of the best of breed email filtering, the best email threat protection, antivirus, where I'm storing data, what my email solutions are, and then on top of that, the productivity software like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc., SharePoint, Teams. When you look at what Office 365 provides, it does provide you that one platform solution. And so based upon, as I mentioned at the end of the session, I'll go through some of the features of each, but all of these things for both the business and the enterprise solution have been covered in the license that you would get. So per user, I add a Microsoft 365 license. I get device and app management from the admin side, some levels of information protection, data archiving, loss prevention, threat protection. You can read all the things that are storage. So really, it's a great bundle for what the price you're paying. You're getting a lot of features and functionality, as opposed to bringing together, again, these third-party or fragmented solutions to the table. And so specifically, as we think about the Office 365 Business Edition, what really is included is the Office applications: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Publisher, and Access, online services, Exchange Online, OneDrive, Skype for Business, SharePoint, and Teams. Again, I mentioned that there's a session tomorrow. The second session is around the collaboration tools. If you haven't seen Microsoft Teams, if you're not using Teams today, but you have Office, either E3 or Business Premium, E3 or above or business premium, and you're not using Teams, you definitely need to go to that session to see how see the tool sets in real time. There's some other business applications that you may not be aware are available in these solutions. Things like Outlook Customer Manager, which is a very light contact management CRM type functionality, Mile IQ for tracking expenses. So they've added some other business apps that are really built for those small, medium businesses. The enhanced security platform. This is where the ability to have administration and security configuration across your devices, whether it be your Windows 10, which is again, as I mentioned, included in this platform. So if you're not on Windows 10, the license is included, and then you can start to leverage the administration tools that go across both your desktop and your mobile devices. Rights management around data prevention and being able to identify key data, that critical data that you don't want to get stolen or accessed incorrectly. Data encryption, malware. One really great feature that most folks don't think about is you may have a bring your own device policy, but how do you, when an employee leaves, how do you ensure that your applications, your data doesn't go with them? This solution allows you to remote wipe that information from those mobile devices without affecting their own applications and things that they have on their phones or devices. So pretty powerful thing that you should be thinking about as you're especially dealing with the BYOD type policy. Lastly, the administration side, ensuring you're always on the most recent version, always have the most recent updates, the most recent antivirus, malware features and functions, and being able to roll out deployments of PC with autopilot. So just some great, I won't hit on all those points, but these are all things within that license price that you get, which is by default $20 per user is all included in this stack. I wanted to highlight one specific as you think about if you're not on using Microsoft or Office 365 Exchange Online today. This is the base level of protection that you get with Microsoft Exchange Online. So essentially, you have with the Exchange Online tool, the protection tool includes filtering, anti-malware, and the antivirus quarantining functionality. So just out of the box, included in that license is the base level of protection that you don't have to add additional add-ons to give you that. There is some additional things with the enterprise that we'll talk about with threat and ransomware protection, advanced threat protection, that even adds on top of what you have here and be able to set policies that give you even more advanced protection. So you might ask yourself, are you a good fit for Microsoft 365 Business? And certainly if you're looking for, if you don't have Office 365 today, you're not leveraging the collaboration tools of Skype, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, this would be a good solution for you to consider. Also, if you want to be up to date, again, all the things we talked about as far as device management, companies that really are looking for the ability to support their users with mobile and desktop type solutions. Basic compliance, data protection, all the things that are important as we relate to security and compliance. And ultimately, if you're at a point from a compelling event perspective where you're at a point of replacing your Windows server, your small business server, if you're doing a refresh, if you have multiple locations, or unfortunately you've experienced some level of breach or cyber attacks, this is certainly some of the reasons those companies that have experienced that, of course, they're at a point where they have to act faster. And really the key here is hopefully you've implemented and invested in the right technology before the compelling event happens. One real key criteria, though, for the Microsoft 365 Business is it really is for under 300 users. So any company, small, medium business company under 300 named Office users would be a good fit. Once you're above the 300 level, we'd want to be looking at the next version, which is the enterprise level. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about enterprise. And there's a lot here. We could spend a couple hours just diving into the feature functionality, but I won't do that for the sake of time. But 4 key pillars of what is Microsoft 365 Enterprise. So on top of everything you saw on the Business Edition, it adds advanced identity and access management. Just highlight one of these with Windows 10 and integrating in the Windows Hello functionality, which is allowing new devices to basically leverage facial recognition to log in versus having to key in your passwords. Passwords are one of the worst as far as exploited areas of security. And certainly creating good password policies or requiring people to change is great. How do you control the post-it note underneath the keyboard or things of that nature? With Windows Hello, obviously it takes away that need for that same level password policies that you're using today. Information protection. This is really cool functionality around no matter where your data resides, in Exchange, in SharePoint, in Teams, how do you ensure that that data is tagged as protected data and set retention policies or ensure that no one can download that data. Some of these tool sets really help provide that, whether it be a document, emails, etc., are not only viewed by intended recipients, but can't be viewed by those that don't have the right access. Advanced threat protection, whether it be the hack, again, hackers, malware, and if there is an issue, how quickly can you get back up and running? Because it's not a matter, again, of if, it's a matter of when these attacks come, and hopefully, again, the level, having the right tools in place will really reduce that exposure. Lastly, security management, and as an admin, being able to manage the security from one dashboard, whether it be around threat protection, information, identity and access management, all these areas is critical. So let's dive in a little bit and just to give you some thinking points around identity protection. Why do I need this, or is this something that's important to me? Number one, do you know, back to your plan, do you know who's accessing your data? Who has access? How are they getting to that data? Can you grant access? Can you take away access in real time? And can you quickly identify and react to a breach? These are all things that are important. And lastly, are users empowered to work securely at anywhere at any time? In our world, and as well as many companies that we work with, remote employees are very commonplace, whether it be a day a week, full time. Where are they residing? Are you ensuring that they're accessing securely all the critical business data that you have available? So where it's important, certainly, again, back to the hacking, the phishing, safeguarding those identities, ensuring that it's protected, detecting issues as they come up, and ultimately protecting against those password attacks, as I mentioned, whether it be Windows Hello or implementing a stronger two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication means I enter my password and I do something else. In our environment, we implemented this for our Exchange and really all of our Office suite. So now we will actually get prompted for our password and then actually receive a text on our phone as our second level of authentication that allows us then to log into our enterprise system. So it goes to our phone, it could have been an email, but there's a second method to be able to validate to make sure users are safely accessing the environment. And here are some of the, to the right here is the example of what that looks like. So when you have this issue, when you have this functionality enabled, you get prompted, you get a text message, you type that in, and then it allows you to sign in. These are some of the elements of how identity protection is really addressed through Office 365, Windows 10 Enterprise, and the Mobility and Security Suite. The next is data security. Is it secure regardless of where you have it stored or shared? Do you need a policy to really control that? And how easily can you respond if for some reason you have to do a discovery? And again, to be able to support some sort of request, is that data easily available, and can you understand how the security has been leveraged in your environment? Lastly, the encryption of sensitive data. Do you have the ability to classify it and encrypt it to ensure that it's, whether it's in transit or if it's sitting on your machines, that it's encrypted and not available for easy access? So obviously, again, another very costly thing if your data gets out, whether it be data leakage, malware, et cetera. Last year at Velocio, at Socius at the time, we had an issue where a couple of our users clicked on an email, looked like it came from a customer. It was an invoice question. They clicked on it. It asked them for their Office login to validate to get to the document. Regardless, it looked, and if you look at the screen, it looked like an Office login. So they thought it was just another login on their email. Didn't really think it was related to what they were clicking on. What happened then is those hackers had full access to their mailbox. They had their ID and their password. They then logged in, created a valid email from that account, and sent it to 7,000 users, including our clients, vendors, et cetera. We were able to respond. We were able to communicate. It did take time to clean that up, but ultimately it became an employee training and also implementation of things like multi-factor authentication. So that way that hacker couldn't just have the password. They also had to have some other mechanism to authenticate to that mailbox. So just another good example where something like that comes into play, and a real world example, even for a technology company, that you have to continue to ensure that users are educated and the right tools are in place to reduce the risk. Again, Office 365, Windows 10 Enterprise, and EMS security, all the functionality that's available with this tool set, which is a ton. And again, as a company, you can decide what feature functionality is important for you based upon where your needs are, whether you're small, medium, large, or whether you have compliance or security needs. A couple more here, and we're about 15 minutes remaining in the presentation, so I want to keep moving and make sure we get just a few more slides. Do you have attack and detection and prevention? So do you have tools that really identify those risks? One thing is a part of digital transformation is machine learning or artificial intelligence. So Microsoft is leveraging all their investments in machine learning and taking those learnings and putting it towards solutions like attack detection and prevention. So essentially, the machines are always learning, understanding how patterns of how people are working, and identifying what those suspicious activities are based upon algorithms and technology. So pretty cool stuff, and really helps us not have to figure out or think through what might be causing these type of activities to occur. Reporting is critical, obviously, and how quickly you can respond to those breaches is critical path as well. Okay, and lastly, can you automatically guard against those attacks and dangerous links? So let's, I'll want to pull up a minute and look at the security and compliance. So I'm logged into the Office 365 admin security and compliance. I just wanted to show, as we think about attack detection and prevention, the threat management dashboard. So this is part of the enterprise suite. And this is just a quick example where you can log in. You can see how your environment has been potentially impacted and hopefully protected by the right technology. So we can see trends. I can click on send and received emails. I can see how many good emails, how many had email, how much spam was detected. I can click on certain activities. I can view reporting, and including, again, top senders receipts, malware detections, spam detections. So all the things that are critical for what you're trying to control are right there available in a dashboard format for you. There is the same level of dashboard for data loss, data governance. All the things we're looking at today have the same single dashboard, single environment from administrator perspective to make it really easy to set up and tweak as you need. So lastly, the compliance, and this is something I want to spend just a couple more minutes on than just the other areas. And again, we hit on this a little bit earlier. What is compliance? Do you have third-party vendors? Do you have customers that need to understand what your compliance and how you're meeting their compliance requirements? Do you know what really constitutes and breaks what you need to report to regulators if that's something that you're a part of, whether it be Sarbanes-Oxley or others? And regulatory compliance, because it can be broad and deep, there's a lot of impact to that. And so with that in mind, one example is the GDPR. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about that. And essentially, this was implemented in May of 2018. It went into effect. And it is essentially what it does is impose any new rules on organizations in the EU and those that offer goods and services to people in the European Union or that collect and analyze data tied to EU residents, no matter where they're located. So that first instinct of, well, this only really affects the European Union or countries across the pond. But reality is, if you work with companies that are in the EU, you are responsible to ensure that that data is managed and controlled following the GDPR regulations. So that includes enhanced privacy rights, increased duty for protecting that data, breach reporting, and significant penalties for noncompliance if you don't follow those regulations. So again, it was approved in 2018, it was put into place, and companies can be fined up to 20 million pounds or 4% of their global revenue, which is ever greater for failure to meet these requirements. Why it's important, why we want to make sure our clients understand it, even if you're not today, do you have any customers that you work with that are transacting in Europe? If so, you need to make sure we pay attention to some of these things. And ultimately, we see more and more, and Microsoft believes in this too, that there's going to be more and more things like this that we need to, even in the US, that we need to continue to understand, and how do we protect our businesses so that we reduce the risk? What are those key things that have to be done? Again, the personal privacy. So making sure that individuals have access to their data. They can correct their own data. They can export their data. Ensuring that you have controls and notifications in your environment in case there is breaches or that someone has appropriate consent, and you can track that consent for accessing and processing data. You have transparent policies where you're able to clearly communicate and provide information about your policies for controlling data. And lastly, you have a strong IT and training program in place to ensure everyone in your organization understands privacy, what the audit and the monitoring features and functions are, and that you have the right systems in place, including a data protection officer if it's required, if you're a larger organization, to manage this requirements. So from that standpoint, there's a lot there. As we go back to the beginning of the slide, plan, design, implement, and really monitor is key, and it really follows the same requirements for the GDPR. Okay, so for sake of time, I'll continue moving on. But as you think about it from a data perspective, with this and many of the compliances, just make sure you have stricter controls. You know where your data is, you have better governance, and you have improved data policies to ensure that there's, the processing follows the right requirements for the compliance requirements. And this ties in, and this is a slide for Microsoft around GDPR. It really follows that earlier thing. You need to do the discovery, you need to manage, protect your data, and then ultimately report, monitor and report on with the documentation and ensuring that you can easily export information as required by the compliance. One other thing I wanted to highlight, and I know this URL looks pretty long here, but if you search for Microsoft Compliance Center as part of Enterprise, Microsoft 365 Enterprise, this is one of the feature functionalities that you get. And this is a full framework for defining your compliance and monitoring your compliance across the different areas of Microsoft technologies that you may have implemented in the system. That includes Office, Azure, Dynamics 365. All those things are critical for your internal use in systems and how that ties to the compliance. So that's, again, just maybe do a search in Bing or Google if you use Google, Microsoft Compliance Center. So ultimately, as you think about from a Velocio perspective, and whether it be for Microsoft Office, Microsoft 365, Azure hosting, Dynamics, Microsoft is really focusing on all these solutions and bringing them together to ensure that you have a single point of solution to address your compliance needs. Okay, so let's get into what a lot of people want to understand is, okay, it's great to hear about all these features and functions. It gets a little, confusing sometimes around Microsoft licensing. I always say you have to almost have a PhD to understand even within the Office suite and the different versions that they have. So I want to try to break it down as simply as we can. The first one is, what are my costs? So if you're looking at the Business Edition and all the things that are included, including Office, Windows, EMS, and security, it's $20 a user up to 300 users. The Enterprise License E3, which follows the same naming convention as Office, is $32, and that includes, in a minute you'll see what it includes, feature functionality. And then the full version E5, which includes the phone, audio conferencing, or the big areas, Power BI is included in that number as well, is about $57 per user per month. And those, and the E3 and the E5 do not have a limit on the maximum number of users that you can have on those platforms. So here's a real quick breakdown of what functionality is included. As you look at the Office suite, the business applications, I mentioned those earlier as part of the business suite, or the B here. The social, the audio, video with Skype. As you go to E3, you pick up the information protection, a little bit more feature functionality around some of the things we hit on around information protection. As you move to E5, of course, you're getting the full suite of features and functionality, with the exception of business applications, which is only available as part of the business suite. So legal discovery, data access control, information protection, all advanced features and functions are built into that license for you. As you add as you look at what is included, the enterprise mobility and security, that includes the mobile device management. That's involved in all of the solutions that you have. As you move up the levels, the feature functionality gets more advanced, more things become available to you. But at the basic level, you have the ability to, as I mentioned, wipe devices to ensure that your data is protected. As you go down identity management wise, you get the more advanced feature integration of your Azure Active Directory, which means your identity of your users. A lot of folks have on-site what they call Active Directory, which is managing your logins. That allows you to move that up to the cloud. And if you have applications that leverage that cloud-based logins, that provides you that single sign-on experience. Okay, threat detection, information protection, app security is all built in as you move up to the E3 and the E5 route as well. And just one more slide on this is comparing the business versus enterprise is the Windows 10. So all of them come with Windows 10. However, the business edition includes the business version, and the enterprise includes the enterprise edition, which provides the advanced security, biometrics, the Windows Hello, the antivirus is in the enterprise, including the Defender antivirus for the desktop, and threat protection using the Windows Defender as well. Okay, and so that really concludes our content. We certainly, if you're a client of Velocio or a potential client of Velocio, we really appreciate the time, your attention to this very important topic. We certainly want to see where we can help you, whether, again, you're already leveraging some of these tools and technologies and we can help you better implement them, or or maybe something you want to evaluate, whether it be at the business or enterprise level, let us know how we can assist, because certainly driving you to the cloud safely is also our intent and desire as you move forward and grow in your business. So thanks again for joining. My information, email address and contact information is here at the end of after the conclusion of the session. We'll also get an email with my contact information. I'd love to hear from you, whether it be feedback, questions, or if you want to talk further about some of these solutions and how Velocity could help. With that, I will return. Please make sure again that you, if you're available for the next session, 3 o'clock, I highly recommend it, and hopefully I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lance. So this concludes our webinar. We'll be sending a follow-up email with Lance's contact information for any questions, as he said, and just thank you all again for joining us today.